Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The first thing you hear inside the Daily Center is the bailiff's voice carrying like a drumbeat. All rise, leather shoes scrape stone, camera shutters chatter. My son leans harder on his cane jaw tight, and I place my hand at the small of his back the way I did when he was 5 and afraid of thunder. Case number 23D487, Carter v. Alvarez. We move as one. The courtroom is limestone and brass, the seal of the state glinting above the bench. I count my breath 4 and 6 out and steer Ethan toward the plaintiff's table. His left leg drags the width of a tile. That's new. I shift my old briefcase to my other hand. The handle is cracked where my thumb once wore the leather smooth. I haven't brought it to a courthouse in years. Across the aisle, a door swings and a small drama makes an entrance. Brooke Carter arrives like a headline emerald dress, mirrored heels, a perfume that announces itself before she does. Behind her, her parents in suburban armor and a brother who never learned how to whisper. At her shoulder glides Dana Klein, all rimless glasses and black binder, the particular calm of a lawyer who believes the math of the room favors her client. Brooke looks at my son and smiles in a way that asks for witnesses. Then she sits, crosses a leg, and waits for the applause that won't come. "Be seated," the judge says. Judge Samuel Whitaker wears the robe lightly. Some men let the robe wear them. He doesn't. He settles in fingers a stack of motions, glances up to survey his stage. The court reporter's machine waits like a little piano. The clerk adjusts a tray of exhibits. The clock ticks once. His eyes find Ethan. I watch compassion flicker. Then he looks past my son, finds me, stops. It's a small pause, nothing on the transcript, everything in the room. "Counsel," he says, and it is not a question so much as a memory testing its legs. I nod once. "Good morning, Your Honor." The gallery rustles. Somewhere a reporter scribbles my name and underlines it twice. I feel the old hum at the base of my skull, the hum that used to carry me through depositions that ran past midnight and cross-exams that felt like surgery. The judge clears his throat. "Let's proceed. Appearances for the record." Dana rises. Dana Klein for the petitioner, Ms. Carter. Her voice is even practiced. The words land with the confidence of a metronome. I remain seated. Ethan squeezes the head of his cane until the knuckles blanch. "Your appearance," the judge asks. "Noted in a moment, Your Honor," I say, with the court's indulgence. The judge studies me for a heartbeat, then motions to Dana. "Ms. Klein, your opening." She lifts a page. "This is a dissolution action. The marriage is irretrievably broken. My client seeks an equitable division of marital assets, including half the equity in the residence at 6240 Riverside, and appropriate orders regarding the minor child Lily Alvarez." Dana turns a square inch toward my son. "Mr. Alvarez's injury is tragic. It is also dispositive. He cannot perform the duties of a partner or parent without significant assistance. Ms. Carter has carried that load long enough." On the last sentence, Brooke touches her temple as if enduring a fainting spell. She is not fainting. She is harvesting sympathy. A man in the gallery mutters. The bailiff stares the sound into silence. The judge looks to me. Nora Alvarez, resupply. He doesn't hide the recognition this time. "Ms. Alvarez." Brooke half turns to her lawyer, lips shaping the name like a rumor she wishes she'd Googled. Her brother leans forward to see me better, as if changing the angle might change the category I occupy. The clerk's pen scratches. The clock ticks again. I slide my briefcase onto the table. The latch complains. Paper breathes. Ethan's breath does too. I place my palm over his, and the tremor under my hand gradually remembers itself into stillness. "Your Honor," I say, "before we get to any division of equity, the court will want to be clear about what is and is not marital property." Dana does not look up, which tells me she's looking up in every possible way. "Go on," the judge says. "The Riverside residence was acquired by my son before the marriage. Title is solely in his name, as is the purchase money. I let the word sit, not to grandstand, but to warn. We'll address any claims of commingling when there's evidence instead of adjectives. Brooke exhales a laugh that is not laughter. He can't even climb the stairs, she says to no one and everyone. What house is he keeping? The judge lifts a brow. Ms. Carter, you'll communicate through counsel. Brooke's father pats her arm like he's tamping down a sparkler. Her mother stares at the seal as if patriotism could be notarized. Dana rises again. We will establish that the home became the family residence and that equity was built during the marriage, entitling my client to her share. She slides a photograph across. Brooke on a porch swing, Ethan behind her in a flannel shirt, a fall afternoon, where leaves play at being confetti. This is not a museum exhibit. This is a life. I do not touch the photo. Lives are relevant, I say. Deeds are controlling. The judge looks between us then to the clerk. Mark Petitioner's Exhibit 1. We'll hear argument on classification. For now, we'll address temporary custody. Dana begins again, pivoting like a dancer who knows both parts. In Lily's best interest, Ms. Carter seeks primary physical custody with reasonable parenting time to Mr. Alvarez, given his limitations and the grandmother's. She searches for the word and picks the one that is wrong. Involvement. The word lands and the room chooses a side without speaking. The grandmother's involvement. It is meant as a problem. It feels like a promise. Ethan inhales to speak and does not find the air. He looks at me not for a script, just for a horizon. His eyes are the darker version of the ones that begged for a first bicycle and a late curfew. Your Honor. I say before the court enters any temporary orders, I would ask leave to enter my appearance as counsel of record for Mr. Alvarez. I open the briefcase fully now and remove a thin wallet I have not carried in public in 5 years. Inside it is a bar card. It is older than some lawyers and younger than my fear. I pass it to the clerk. The clerk reads the name twice. The judge doesn't need to. He remembers the case that taught him where a closing argument ends and a verdict begins. That case lived in a different courtroom, a different year, under a different judge, whose future turned out smaller than his robe. Ms. Alvarez, he says, voice neutral, hands folded. You're prepared to proceed as counsel today. I am. Dana adjusts her glasses. Your Honor, if Ms. Alvarez has been inactive with the bar, we would ask for proof of good standing. The clerk is already handing up a printout. The little machine on her desk rattles like a cicada. The judge scans the page, nods once, stamps it with something that sounds like a door locking or a door opening. Appearance is granted, he says. A pulse travels the benches. Someone in the second row whispers to someone else, who will later pretend they knew it all along. I gather the edges of the day into a neat square. Exhibit folders align. Ethan's cane sits at a perfect diagonal beside his chair. My pen uncaps with a click that ricochets off the paneled walls and returns to me as courage I recognize. Very well, the judge says. Ms. Klein, temporary custody. Then we'll take up classification of the residence. The court reporter nods fingers to keys. The clock's second hand slips over the 12 and begins again. I rest my palm on Ethan's wrist, feel the steadying there, and turn to face the thing we came here to name. The first dispute the court takes up is temporary custody. Dana speaks about stability as if it were a product listing routines and bedtimes like line items. I keep my hands folded and listen not to be polite, but to measure where the ground gives. When the judge asks for context on the residence, I say we'll address classification with documents. Then the clock's second hand drifts, and the old year begins again in my head, not as nostalgia, but as evidence that breathes. Ethan bought the Riverside house before he ever met Brooke. He brought me to the closing because he said I had earned a first-row seat. The lawyer across the table droned through the stack note, mortgage disclosures until the deed slid forward, and the notary's stamp thumped like a small gavel. Outside under a stubborn March sky, Ethan pressed a key into my palm. It was brass and heavier than it looked, engraved EA on the bow. We won't get pushed around by rent anymore, he said. He meant it like a vow. The house was not a mansion. It was honest oak floors that kept the scuffs of other lives, a porch that faced west so the light came warm in the last hour of day. We painted the front room ourselves. There is a photograph somewhere of Ethan with a streak of blue across his cheek, grinning like he had stolen a season from a better world. He kept the deed in a file box he labeled in block letters, separate. He didn't choose the word for law, he chose it for pride. I left the practice not long after that closing, not because I had lost my taste for a fight, but because I had watched a judge take something bribes could not buy, verdict yes, but also trust and sell it cheap. The robe should have been enough. It wasn't for him. I boxed my books, canceled my Westlaw, carried my briefcase to the attic, and told myself a woman can retire from the battlefield without surrendering the banner she marched under. It turns out banners do not rot. They wait. Brooke arrived a summer later at a barbecue, all bright laugh and easy conversation. She asked about Ethan's wiring projects. He explained load calculations with a tongue that tied itself when he was nervous. She untied it by listening. That is how it starts, with someone giving you your own words back in a better arrangement. When they married in a courthouse ceremony, I tied a ribbon around a spare key and wrote a card that said, "May this be the address where good things find you." They framed the card. The day of the accident split time into before and after. I was sorting invoices at the kitchen table when the call came through. The foreman's voice carried the echo of a place with concrete floors and hard hats hanging like helmets in a locker room. A scaffold shift, a live wire, the kind of mistake that makes a courtroom out of a job site. By the time I reached the ER, Ethan lay cocooned in dressings and quiet. A nurse showed me a clipboard with boxes I was supposed to check. I signed my name as if the ink could steady his breathing. OSHA came and wrote a report in a language that pretends neutrality. The workers' comp carrier mailed a letter that called him claimant and described his pain with adjectives that did not sting. Physical therapy became a calendar we bowed to. The mile to the clinic took half an hour, and on good days, we could make it without stopping. On bad days, the air weighed more. He learned the genius of a cane, how to measure a room by the number of steps between a chair and the next promise. At first, Brooke tried. She set alarms for medication-arranged pillows as if they were chess pieces in a game she intended to win. When visitors came, she tucked Ethan's hair behind his ear and called him babe, and her voice made us all want to believe that love was a strong enough brace to hold a man upright. I cooked too much chili and left it on their stove, wrote out physical therapy stretches on index cards, and took the late-night watch when phantom sparks ran through the damaged nerves like mean ideas. The shift began small. She stayed longer at the salon, laughed on the porch, into a phone that made her smile wider than anything in the room. The credit card statements lost their shyness and arrived fat with dresses that had names. The perfume gathered in the hallway like a visitor who overstayed. At dinner, I slid a plate toward her, a casserole I used to make when money did not reach the end of a month. "I'm not hungry," she said, and moved food around with the flat of a fork. Ethan told her about the new grip his therapist taught him. She scrolled her phone and nodded at a point somewhere over his left shoulder. One morning, Ethan asked for help getting down the back steps to the small patch of yard where the light is kindest around 10. "I'll be right there," Brooke said, and then the front door clicked and her car left a rectangle of absence on the curb. I used the belt around his waist and my arm below his counted down our little descent. He apologized, which is the word men use when they are stubborn and the world takes something they would have given gladly. We sat on the bottom step and watched a squirrel make a plan it was certain would work. To live in a house is to learn its sounds. The night I heard Brooke's footsteps cross the hallway and pause outside Lily's room, I was folding towels that had loved too many laundromats. I am not a woman who eavesdrops. I am a woman who will not pretend not to hear when the shape of a child's voice changes. The door closed. Brooke's words began low, the way people talk when they want to install a thought without the subject knowing where it came from. "You need to tell the judge that Daddy can't take care of you," she said. Lily's answer was small and correct, "but he can." Brooke's voice softened, which is how pressure hides. He needs help to stand up, baby. Judges need to know. If you don't say it right, we could lose the house. Do you want to lose the house? I put the towel down and steadied my hands on the edge of the counter. There are things a grandmother is allowed to do, and one of them is guard the seams of a child's honesty. I opened my phone and pressed the red circle on the voice memo app, slid it onto the bookshelf in the hallway, and prayed that technology built to capture grocery lists would do a nobler thing for once. Brooke kept talking about judges and houses, about what brave girls say when they love their mothers properly. Lily cried in such careful sobs that I had to count to 5 between breaths to keep from walking in. After Brooke kissed the air and said goodnight after Lily hiccuped herself to sleep, I retrieved the phone. I did not listen to the file. I labeled it with a date and a word I could live with. Hallway. Then I sat on the top stair and stared at the banister until the wood grain looked like a map. Ethan's room down the hall had the faint glow of late television. When I checked on him, he pretended to be asleep and succeeded. There were other straws that thought themselves ordinary and were not. A neighbor with a talent for whispering told me she'd seen Brooke with a man at a hotel bar near the lake. I said thank you the way you say thank you when you cannot yet decide whether information is help or gravity. A week later, a rideshare receipt flashed on the iPad, an address I recognized as a place that charged too much for views. I do not build cases out of innuendo. I build them out of things that can stand under weight. The present returns. In court, Dana lists daycare pickups and school emails and says the word stability again as if repetition grants ownership. I respond where necessary and accept the rest as wind. The judge asks whether the parties have considered a temporary schedule. We trade positions like chess players who know the opening book better than life. The clerk notes a status date. When the gavel taps, the sound is ceremonial. The real decisions happen in the inches of paper between tabs. Outside the plaza makes a cathedral out of light. Ethan moves slower on stone than on the quiet floors at home. I match him half a step behind, the way you spot a lifter with hands near the bar but not touching. Brooke's people peel off toward the elevators without looking back. A reporter asks me for a quote. I say nothing. Ethan asks Vignev for water. I buy a bottle and hold the cap while he drinks, which is the kind of choreography we never practiced and now perform without music. At home, the afternoon sifts through the blinds and makes stripes on the floor. Lily sits at the table coloring a rocket with a ladder that reaches the moon. Grandma, are you staying for dinner? She asks. If I'm invited, I say. She nods in the serious way of 8-year-olds deputized by imagination. When the house quiets to the hum of a refrigerator and the irregular tick of the baseboard heater, I go to my room and open the top desk drawer. There is a stack of business cards under the stapler, a little pack of past lives. I shuffle through until a name looks back at me like a bridge Frank Delgado licensed investigator. The phone number hasn't changed. The world has. I pick up the receiver, steady it in my hand, and begin to dial. Frank answers on the third ring with the voice of a man who keeps a notebook beside the bed. Alvarez. Thought you'd hung up your spurs. Maybe I put them where I could find them, I say. You have time for coffee. He proposes a diner near the river where the coffee is honest and the waitress calls everyone sweetheart without irony. He arrives in a jacket that looks unbothered by weather, a camera bag slung crossbody like a habit he's learned to live with. We don't waste minutes. I slide a legal pad across the table, draw a box around 3 words, who, where, when, and tell him what I can prove and what I intend to. Brooke, I say, hotel near the lake. A man named Victor Lang. I don't need color, I need verifiable. Frank flips his pad to a clean page. No hacking, no heroics. Photos with timestamps. Establish pattern. If there are receipts, we get them the right way. The right way, I repeat, remembering how many wrong ways I've watched people prefer. I'll handle subpoenas and notices to produce. You document. He taps the pen, kid stays out of it. Lily stays out of it, I say, drawing a line under the name like a fence. We have enough to carry. He studies my face as if evaluating light. You look steady, he says. I'm not required to be anything else. The first night at the Lang Hotel comes with rain, the kind that shines sidewalks and teaches neon to speak. Frank stations himself across the street beneath a scratched awning that smells faintly of old cigarettes and cheap miracles. I sit 2 blocks away in my car, the heater set to low, the kind of stakeout that belongs to lawyers who trust the report but cannot quite outsource the pulse. On his text thread, pictures post and sequence the entrance, the revolving door, a concierge who could be a statue if his eyes didn't move. Then Brooke Emerald under the overhang, a dress that treats the weather like suggestion. Beside her, a man the internet will later confirm is Victor, barbered beard coat that fits like it remembers him, confidence that wears no name tag because it assumes its invitation is permanent. Frank switches to a longer lens. Shutter, pause, shutter. He keeps the ISO low to avoid noise, the aperture high enough to catch both faces. A doorman steps forward and looks past him into the night, the way men trained to see trouble scan for it, where it hides best in calm. Frank angles the camera down. The doorman decides the trouble is elsewhere and goes to open a taxi door. On my screen, the metadata appears in quiet brackets, date, time, GPS. I copy the numbers into a notepad app and feel the old satisfaction of numbers making a story a court can hold without dropping. When Brooke and Victor disappear into the lobby, Frank drifts to the glass and tilts the lens just enough to catch their reflection in the black marble. It is not art. It is evidence. He sends it anyway. I leave the car only once to feed the meter, and the rain does what rain has always done for women who stand still too long in cities. It makes you invisible. The next morning I draft a request to produce under the state rules, bank statements, credit card statements, hotel folios, rideshare logs for the 3 months preceding the petition date. I add a notice to admit facts that asks for confirmations that Brooke met Victor at the Lang Hotel on listed dates, that she charged drinks to a card ending in the 4 digits I saw flash on the iPad when a receipt notification forgot whose hands it belonged to. Ethan signs the discovery request, his signature steady enough to make me want to applaud a man for the ordinary heroics of penmanship. I call the clerk and arrange subpoenas, deuces, take 'em to the hotel and the rideshare company. The kind of paperwork that makes corporations suddenly remember they keep records because they fear the alternative. I send a polite letter to Dana offering inspection of original documents at my office on mutually convenient dates. I do not say yet what I have. Law is a conversation conducted best at the volume of reason. Chain of custody is its own religion. I take the phone with the hallway recording, open the voice memo, and export a copy to an external drive while the screen shows the spinning circle we've all learned to measure anxiety by. When the copy completes, I calculate a hash value, a string of characters that means what it says without poetry. I write the number on an index card and tuck it into a file labeled USB audio. I print the phone settings page that shows date and time and put it with an affidavit I draft for myself attesting to the recording's origin and the fact that I did not edit more than the world already had. I call a notary I still trust from a life with longer lunches and ask her to meet me in my kitchen. She stamps where the law says she has to. The paper smells faintly of lemon soap and ink. Frank calls from a parking garage where the echo makes him sound like a man hiding in an organ. They're back, he says. Same hotel, different suit. I don't ask him which suit. He doesn't tell me. He sends photos of arrivals and departures time-stamped, a hand at the small of Brooke's back that reads as habit, a valet ticket with numbers large enough to read. He stakes out a bar in the lobby, orders club soda, and captures a server setting a crystal tumbler with a sprig of rosemary down on a table that becomes a reference point with each frame. At the end of his shift, he texts pattern established. He does not use exclamation points, which is how you can tell a man is professional. At the title company, I order a title search on the Riverside house and have them pull a copy of the deed from the day Ethan handed me a brass key. The chain is clean grammar to grantee with no detours. Mortgage signed before the marriage. A release that cleared it years later from Ethan's own account. I stop at the bank and ask for certified copies of statements showing the mortgage drafts and property tax checks. The teller prints them without commentary, the quiet efficiency of someone who watches lives and columns and knows the difference between red and black. At the physical therapy clinic, I sit in a chair, shyly upholstered in optimism, and ask the therapist for a letter addressing what Ethan can do with and without assistance. He writes in the precise verbs of his trade: transfers, ambulates, navigates. He notes adaptive equipment strategies for stairs, the tendency of pain to arrive like weather but leave like a guest who suddenly remembers a flight. He does not evaluate parenting. He documents capacity. That is what a court needs when the word can is disputed by people who prefer adjectives. Lily's teacher agrees to produce attendance logs and the schedule of pickups and drop-offs. I don't ask for commentary. I ask for calendars because calendars rarely lie. On the way out, I pause at the bulletin board where a child has drawn a rocket and a ladder long enough to reach a moon with a happy face. I do not read the name in the corner. I know the handwriting. Dana's office responds with a cordial email confirming receipt of discovery and objecting to half of it. She calls my requests fishing expeditions and uses the word overbroad twice. I reply with a note that narrows a date range and encloses courtesy copies of the subpoenas already served. I add a line offering to stipulate to authenticity to streamline the hearing. When you read it quickly, it sounds like cooperation. When you read it slowly, it is. The guardian ad litem assignment comes through with a name. I trust a woman who has made a career of looking at adults until they remember the child in the room. I send over the necessary contact information and wait for the email that will set interviews. It arrives the next afternoon, the kind of tone that leaves people's dignity intact as it asks for their time. On a Tuesday that smells like wet wool and old coffee, Frank and I end up back near the lake. He's inside the hotel this time, seated beneath a painting of water that cannot drown anyone. I'm in the car with a map of the block in my head, the service entrance, the garage, the alley that feeds the kitchen. He texts security on the move, and I feel the animal part of my brain take 2 steps backward without moving my body at all. He slips into the restroom, waits 2 songs, texts clear, and returns to the lobby where his soda melts into itself. When he leaves, the photos in his camera add their weight to a folder that starts to feel heavier than its bytes. At home, after Lily falls asleep with a book tented on her chest and Ethan's cane leans at a safe angle by his bed, I spread the trial binder out on the dining room table like blueprints. Tab A deed. Title: Mortgage History. Tab B. Bank statements, property tax receipts. Tab C. Audio chain of custody hash. Printout affidavit. Tab D. Photos. Hotel entries, exits, timestamps, valet stubs. Tab EPT letter, clinic notes. Proof of adaptive capacity. Tab F. School calendars. Tab G. Subpoenas, served returns hotel folios when they come. I print cover sheets with clean fonts. I don't decorate. I don't sermonize. I put pages in protectors because the world has sauces in hands. Ethan comes to the doorway and leans on the jamb like he is pretending to admire the woodwork. Is it a lot? He asks. It's enough, I say, and turn a page. He studies the tabs. You're writing our life down. I'm writing down the parts that strangers are allowed to touch, I answer. He nods as if that makes sense, which it does for 2 people who have understood for years that some things are spoken and some things are kept. He goes back to his room. I return to Exhibit C and check the time codes against the phone's settings page. I match numbers the way some people match socks. The crosshatch of order calms the parts of me that know chaos does not require invitation. The USB sits in the center of the table like a reluctant witness. I hold it between my fingers and feel the slight warmth plastic collects from human hands. I do not play the file. I do not need to hear a child cry to remember what it sounds like. I tuck the drive into a small zippered pouch and attach it to the binder with a strip of Velcro no judge will see. Frank's last email of the week arrives with a subject line that serves as a plain label for a complicated thing deliverables. Inside a link to a secure folder, a summary log with dates and times, copies of his license and insurance, a brief note that says, available if you need testimony. I file the log behind the photos, note, the time sign my initials in pencil at the bottom of the index card like a small audit. Before midnight, the apartment settles into the kind of quiet that owes you nothing and gives you more than that. I close the binder. The clasp snaps shut with a neat certainty. I slide the stack back into the old briefcase whose handle has learned the shape of my hand. Then I turn off the kitchen light and stand for a moment at the doorway, letting the room remember itself without me. By the time the clerk calls our number again, the binder has the weight of a small verdict. We stand when the bailiff says to sit, when the judge does, and breathe as if the room will allow it. Ms. Klein, Judge Whittaker says you may proceed. Dana calls Brooke. On direct, the story wears polish. She speaks of bedtimes of a calendar that holds still because she keeps it there. She calls the Riverside house our home with a practiced affection and describes weekends spent sanding trim as if a porch swing could redraw a deed. Did you make improvements? Dana prompts. Of course, Brooke says. We painted, we landscaped, we... Thank you, Dana says, and lifts Petitioner's Exhibit 1, the same photo of the fall afternoon swing and flannel, and leaves auditioning as confetti. And was this taken during the marriage? Yes. Dana sits. Her questions are tidy and her shoes are quieter than her client's breathing. I rise, cross. Brooke squares her shoulders as if photographs could become facts on command. Ms. Carter, I begin voice. Even you testified you made improvements to the Riverside property. Did you contribute funds from an account in your name to the down payment? We were married, she says, as if grammar could rescue math. It's a yes or no. No. And the mortgage paid off before the wedding. She blinks. I don't know. From tab A. I lift the certified copy of the deed and the release of mortgage. Your Honor, Respondent's Exhibit. A deed recorded March 12th, year 1, mortgage released 4 years later from Ethan Alvarez's separate account, certified by the Recorder of Deeds. Dana is on her feet. Objection foundation. Certified public records, I say self-authenticating. Illinois Rule 902. Overruled, the judge says. Admitted. I slide the pages onto the rail so the court can see the dates without the soundtrack. Ms. Carter, you've paid property taxes from a joint account. I handled bills. Which bills I lift? Tab B, the bank statements. Property taxes were drafted from Mr. Alvarez's separate account, correct? She looks to Dana. Dana shakes her head once, a small counsel not to drown. I guess so, Brooke says. Let's move, I say, to parenting. Dana stirs. Your Honor, relevance. Best interests, I answer. Allocation of parental responsibilities factor F, willingness, an ability to place the child's needs ahead of one's own. Proceed, the judge says. I flip to tab E. Miss Carter, when Ethan began physical therapy, you attended sessions. Some, she says. On the day he asked for help down the back steps, did you assist? I had to be somewhere. Where? She swallows. Errands. No further questions for now. I sit. The air thins a notch. Respondent, the judge says. Respondent calls Frank Delgado. Frank takes the stand with the posture of a man who has told truths on small stages. I cover the basics. Name, license, years, and practice. I walk him through the camera he uses, the way the timestamps write themselves, the way metadata is not flavor but proof. Mr. Delgado, did you conduct lawful surveillance on Ms. Carter? Yes. Did you observe Ms. Carter at the Lang Hotel on the dates listed in your report? Yes. Your Honor, Respondent's Exhibit C, still photographs arrivals and departures, true and accurate representations with embedded timestamps, and a summary log. Dana stands. Objection relevance 403 prejudice. Goes to credibility, I say, and dissipation of assets. Also parenting availability. Limited purpose, the judge says, admitted. I place a photo on the rail. Brooke under the overhang, Victor a step behind the doorman holding the weather back. Frank identifies his work without embellishment. I do not ask for more than the frames already say. Nothing further. Dana passes on cross, strategic or tired. I stand again. Respondent calls Nora Alvarez. The clerk swears me in. Some lawyers avoid their own oath like superstition. I do not. I keep my testimony short. I lay the chain for the audio. Ms. Alvarez, did you make a recording on your phone on day? Yes. Where? Hallway outside Lily's room. Was anyone's voice loud enough to be heard without amplification? Yes. Did you alter the recording? No. Did you compute a hash value for the original file? Yes. I lift the index card. This string matches the copy provided to counsel. Dana is up. Objection, hearsay, and illegal eavesdropping. It's not hearsay to the extent it contains party admissions, I say, and offered to show effect on the listener and coaching. As to the recording, this was in the family residence made by a household member, no reasonable expectation of privacy in the hallway. For any residual concern we can admit for impeachment and credibility only. The judge leans back, considers, nods. Admitted for limited purposes. I'll give it the weight it deserves. I connect the USB. The court reporter stills her fingers. The room concentrates. The sound is thin and present at once. Brooke's voice pitched soft, the kind softness uses to pass as kindness. You need to tell the judge that Daddy can't take care of you. Lily's voice smaller, truer, but he can. The rest is a set of sentences that thinks it's a lullaby and isn't. I stop the file before anyone in the room needs to pretend they aren't wiping their eyes. Dana clears her throat. Objection to the dramatics. Overruled, the judge says not unkindly. Bench trial. I offer nothing further. The evidence stands better when unaccompanied. Respondent calls Ethan Alvarez, I say. Ethan makes it to the stand with the careful pride of a man who refuses to be reduced to his gait. I keep it simple. Mr. Alvarez, can you get Lily to school? Yes. Can you prepare meals? Yes. I plan ahead. Crock pots were invented for a reason. Can you assist with homework? He smiles without looking at Brooke. Long division is my love language. I lift the PT letter. Your Honor, Respondent's Exhibit E, Physical Therapist's Report. It addresses capacities, transfer, stairs, ambulation with cane, and home modifications. Admitted, the judge says. Dana rises for cross. Mr. Alvarez, you can't carry your daughter up the stairs, can you? I don't need to, he says. Her room is on the first floor now, and if she's sick at night, I've been up for harder nights. No further questions. The guardian ad litem testifies with professional restraint. She references home visits notes, the calm in Ethan's living room, the completed math worksheet, the casserole cooling on the stove. She remarks on Brooke's guarded answers and the insistence that the child say the right thing because judges expect it. She does not recommend in so many words. She provides the court with the map it asked for. When the witnesses rest, the judge folds his hands. Closing. Dana goes first. She speaks of marital partnership of homes built by two sets of hands, even if one hand wrote the checks. She returns to stability and structure and the idea that love is measured in lists. I stand for ours. Property classification begins with title, I say. The Riverside house was acquired before the marriage mortgage paid from separate funds. There is no evidence of transmutation, no commingling that converts a deed into a wish. On parenting, the standard is best interests. You have heard a child coached to recite a script against her lived experience. You have seen a father who adapted, not surrendered. You have admissible evidence of a relationship Ms. Carter chose elsewhere, not to scandalize but to illuminate credibility and attention. I keep it there. No flourishes. The binder sits closed as if to say the thing it needs enough. The judge nods once. Thank you, counsel. He looks to the clerk. Mark the exhibits as noted. He looks to us. The court will take the matter under advisement. We'll reconvene for ruling. The gavel taps not loud, just final enough for the day. We stand because the bailiff asks us to, and because ritual is another way a room like this remembers what it's for. Ethan's cane finds its line on the floor. I gather the briefcase by its old handle and feel the leather accept my grip as if it never forgot. The courtroom fills before the hour. Coats drape over arms, whispers skim the pews, the seal above the bench holds its stillness. When the clerk calls our case, the sound lands like a pin in cloth. We stand. The judge enters. The room remembers how to be quiet. "Be seated," Judge Whittaker says. He looks down at the file as if measuring its height against the law. This matter is before the court for ruling. He begins where courts begin with findings. On classification of the Riverside residence, he says the evidence shows title taken by Mr. Alvarez. Prior to the marriage, mortgage retired from non-marital funds, property taxes paid from a separate account. There is no persuasive proof of transmutation or commingling sufficient to convert non-marital property to marital. The Riverside property is classified as Mr. Alvarez's non-marital asset. No equitable carve-out is warranted. Dana writes something and stops halfway through the word. Brooke stares at the grain of the counsel table as if it might give. On dissolution, the judge continues, grounds are established. The marriage is irretrievably broken. The court grants the petition. He turns a page. The rustle is the only applause the paper will receive. On parental allocation and parenting time, he says, the legal standard is the child's best interests. The court considered the testimony, the guardian ad litem's report, the therapist's letter school records, and the audio recording offered for limited purposes. He looks up. The court finds that Mr. Alvarez, despite his injury, has adapted his home and routines to meet the child's daily needs. The child is bonded, comfortable, and safe in that environment. The court is concerned about Ms. Carter's coaching of the child regarding statements to the court. Brooke's hands knot, then unknot. Accordingly, the judge says voice, even primary residential custody, is awarded to Mr. Alvarez. Decision-making will be joint with day-to-day decisions in the residential parent. Ms. Carter shall have supervised parenting time at the Family Services Center 2 hours weekly to be reviewed after 90 days on the guardian ad litem's recommendation. Dana starts to rise. The judge lifts a palm. I've weighed the record. This structure protects the child and affords Ms. Carter an opportunity to demonstrate reliability. He goes on. On financial issues, each party retains non-marital property free of any claim of the other. No maintenance is awarded. Attorney's fees are reserved. Parties bear their own costs to date. Any remaining discovery disputes are moot. He caps the pen and sets it aside as if the tool has finished its work. Counsel prepare a written order consistent with these findings. The clerk will provide dates for review. The gavel taps once. Not triumph, not punishment, authority concluding what it began. We stand because we are told to, and because standing is one way to accept the shape of a day. Ethan exhales a breath I didn't know he had been holding since the first petition was filed. The cane sits low against his knee, his fingers loosen. Across the aisle, Brooke's brother stares at the floor as if it might lift. Brooke looks to Dana, then to the door. The door offers no arguments. The clerk slides a minute order to the edge of the bench. I take it, read the lines that matter, and feel the room widen. The bailiff calls the next case. People replace us on the small stage without meaning to. In the corridor, sound returns in layers, the elevator bell, a rolling briefcase, someone's laugh that doesn't belong to a courthouse. Dana stops near the bronze directory and nods once. It is not surrender and not defiance. It is a professional acknowledging the math. Good record, she says, and moves on. The guardian ad litem closes her folder. I'll schedule the 90-day review, she says. Lily's teacher left a message. She wants to make sure pickups keep feeling ordinary. Ordinary is the goal, I say. Frank appears, camera bag quiet on his shoulder. He shakes Ethan's hand. You did fine, he says, meaning you told the truth without extra flour. We step out into the plaza. The flag lifts in a breeze that smells like lake water and bus exhaust. The clock on the tower takes its time and then gives it back in a single measured strike. Lily's backpack bounces as she runs across the stones. The guardian ad litem must have arranged the timing. She wraps Ethan at the waist as if she were the one who needed balance. His palm covers the back of her head in a hold that is gentler than gravity. "Home?" she asks. "Home," he says. At Riverside, the porch light is still on from last night and reminds us the switch works. Inside, Lily spreads crayons on the table and finishes a drawing that has waded through hearings and hallways. The rocket now carries a window. In the window, a circle with hair. Dad, she prints carefully under the shape, then adds Grandma because space missions use crews. In the kitchen, the slow cooker clicks to warm. I lift the lid and stir once. Steam fogs my glasses. The ordinary miracle of dinner reappears. Ethan moves a chair back with his foot and tests the balance of his weight the way he always does before he sits. He does not ask me to stay. The invitation exists without words. I set the minute order beside the salt. It looks smaller here, stripped of marble and echo. Lily points to the paper. "Is that homework?" she asks. In a way, I tell her. She fetches bowls from the cabinet she can now reach without standing on her toes. Ethan ladles chili, careful not to overfill, careful always. We eat, and the forks click, and the television in the living room murmurs to itself without requiring an audience. Midway through, Ethan wipes his mouth with the back of his hand and catches himself, folds the napkin like a man determined to remember which rituals he can keep. When the dishes pile, I rinse and stack. The sink runs warm. Through the window, the yard holds its small winter. The back steps wait the same 3 that have measured his progress. Later, he will take them one by one because that is how steps work, and because he can. Lily will draw a new ladder on fresh paper and make it longer than the last. The cane will lean in its usual corner, not a symbol, just a tool. I take the trial binder from the briefcase and slide it onto the highest shelf of the pantry spine out tabs, facing the wall. It becomes what records become when they have done their job, available, not urgent. The briefcase goes under the coat rack where umbrellas live. Its handle knows my hand, but neither of us needs the other tonight. Brooke's car idles at the curb and then leaves the sound of a decision choosing a direction. No one watches it go. When Lily's eyelids begin to give up, I help her with the buttons on her pajamas, the kind with planets that do not agree to scale. She climbs into bed and tucks the rocket drawing under her pillow. "For later," she says. I smooth her hair and turn the lamp down until the room forgets to be awake. Back in the hallway, the floor keeps its old creaks in the same places it always has. Ethan adjusts a picture frame that sits a little crooked, then lets it be. He stands with his palm on the wall, reading its temperature, deciding whether pain will argue with sleep or acquiesce. We do not need to narrate it. The night knows its lines. On the porch, air colder than the house puts clear edges on everything it touches. I look down the block at the thin ribbon of tail lights and then back at the door we came through. I flick the switch. The bulb hums and holds. The street is quiet enough to hear the clock in my own kitchen tick on the minute. Inside, the minute order waits where I left it, the ink dry, the lines unambiguous. I fold it once and place it in a folder marked Orders. The drawer slides shut with a sound that agrees with the moment. The house keeps its shape. The people in it keep theirs. The day does what days at last are supposed to do, end. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.